Good evening, everybody. Welcome to MedEdits office hours. If you can hear me, if someone could just let me know that we are live and that you can hear me, that would be great. The weather here in New York is fabulous. I hope it's great where you are as well. So we're just going to wait for people to sort of trickle in, which they usually do after about 5 minutes. And then we will get started. Okay, so I want to encourage everybody watching to ask as many questions as you like. I know there are definitely people who watch this after we broadcast, and so that's wonderful. So the more questions you ask that apply to, as many people as possible, really is quite helpful. Although, as I always say, I am perfectly comfortable and okay with just talking about all things medical admissions. So, and there really is, there's a limitless number of topics to discuss. So anyway, so as far as MedEdit students right now, the part of the cycle that we are now approaching is some of our medical school applicants are starting to receive interviews. They are definitely trickling in. The vast majority of our medical school applicants, even those who have received interviews, are working on secondary essays. And then those applicants who applied last year are getting ready to start medical school in August. So we're super excited for them. And we are super excited, obviously, for our medical school applicants who are about to start this process. And like I said, certainly a handful of students have already gotten interviews. That does not mean that you should in any way be concerned if you don't have medical school interviews. It's still very, very early in the process. The vast majority of schools have not extended any interviews yet. So no worries there. So, we expect that most students will be receiving interviews in September, somewhere around there, but certainly in August, students do start to receive interviews. And then as far as our residency applicants, our residency students from last year are all starting internships. And then we are starting to work more intensively with our residency applicants for the upcoming match for 2022. Now that cycle has been pushed back a little bit, and some of those changes were saved from COVID. So after COVID, so applications are not going to start to be received and reviewed by residency programs until late September. So that certainly changes that timeline a bit. And I recently posted a video about the most, the most concerning trends that we find that students are most concerned about in terms of which specialties are the most competitive to match into, which residency applicant types typically match into different specialties. Does it matter if you go to an MD or a DO or an offshore medical school? And of course, the answer to that is yes, it does matter. And it impacts, your future career aspirations and where you can potentially match and what specialty you can match into. And so regardless of where you are in this process, whether you are a pre-med, whether you are a medical school applicant, whether you are getting ready to apply for residency, I do think that the match video that I posted most recently would be useful for everybody, and we will go ahead and we will put a link to that, but it is on our YouTube channel. So, just for those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Jessica Friedman. I am the chair and founder of MedEdits Medical Admissions. I am also a former residency and medical school admissions officer. All we do here at MedEdits is medical admissions. We also work with, BSMD applicants. So our BSMD applicants, since I didn't touch on that group, they are getting ready to apply in the fall to college if they are applying early decision, or they are getting ready to apply to medical school. To college and to BSMD programs in early January, early to mid-January, depending on deadlines. So those students are sort of just starting to work on their applications now. So I'm just going to go ahead and answer some questions. But, for the people watching, please post your questions. So we are certainly getting a lot of questions this year about Casper, about situational judgment tests that are required by some medical schools in the medical school admissions process, okay? We are finding that students stress way too much about these situational judgment tests, okay? Medical school admissions committees do not use the results of these tests in a decision-making capacity. In other words, if you do badly on the test or not as well as you would like, right? So Casper is now releasing results to students based on the quartile that you are a part of. So let's say you are in the 0 to 25th percentile of, in terms of Casper results. Does that mean you're not getting any medical school interviews? No, it really doesn't. That information is used to corroborate information that is included in your letters of recommendation. So let's say, the admissions officer reading your application after reading your letters has some concerns about, some of your interpersonal qualities and characteristics, right? Then what they might do is they would obviously read the rest of your application, your personal statement, your application entries, but they might then look to the Casper results to see if, the results of your Casper sort of support, the concerns that maybe somebody addressed in a letter of recommendation, okay? By the same token, let's say you get in the 75th to 100th percentile on your Casper, right? And let's say your letters of recommendation are stellar, then again, that kind of supports, right? That, what is being said about you in your letters of recommendation is supported by your Casper results, okay? By the same token, let's say there are concerns with your letters of recommendation. A 75th to 100th percentile in the Casper is not going to sort of, trump what those letters of recommendation say. So obviously letters of recommendation are way more important than a situational judgment test, and you are not going to get accepted or rejected based on your situational judgment test, okay? So those are certainly some of the biggest concerns I would say that our applicants are having now. People are also, very busy with secondary essays. Students are asking us right now, how important is it that I turn my secondary essays around, in 2 weeks, which sort of seems to be what some students think they have to do with all their secondary essays. We really discourage students from rushing their secondary essays. Now, if a school specifically tells you you must submit a secondary essay, you must turn it around within 2 weeks, then by all means, you have to do that. But if a school does not specify this, then you should be, considering where, when you want to complete that secondary based on how high that school is on your list. So you want to complete your secondary essays with your most important schools first, and you want to make sure that you also complete your secondary essays. So you're not doing, for example, all of your reach schools first, that you're, kind of doing them in a more sequential fashion. So you're doing one reach, one target, one safest, right? So you're getting them sort of done equally. And then obviously you want to fill them out in terms of your preference with those types of schools. As far as our residency applicants, I would say the biggest question students have right now are about personal statements for residency. We are finding that more and more students want to, tailor their personal statements for individual programs. And we find that there are some programs that are even encouraging this, okay? We do not want students writing an entire personal statement anew for a residency program. Still, the vast majority of residency programs are not expecting you to do this. If a program, let's say, is definitely your top choice, you might, tailor a personal statement specifically to that program. Or let's say, you really want to go to school, in a specific geographic area, you could write one personal statement that kind of targets that specific geographic area, and then send it to those programs in that specific geographic area. So we are finding that students are definitely wanting to kind of tailor things to the residency programs they're applying to a little bit more specifically. Again, we don't necessarily think this is absolutely necessary, and we don't find that applicants have more success by doing that. Okay, we find that the results are the same whether you tailor a personal statement or you don't tailor a personal statement. The only way that we would encourage you definitely to do that is if a program encourages you to do that. ERAS also this year has something called a supplemental part of the application, which is being required, I believe, for dermatology, surgery, and internal medicine. So that is something new, that is being done this year. And some residency programs, obviously we don't know which yet, last year we saw this trend, are requiring additional supplemental essays in the same way that medical schools did. Okay, we think this is because programs are just simply getting too many applications. They don't have the people power to review that many applications. Okay, so it becomes a very laborious process for the 2 to 3 people who might be reviewing residency applications to kind of go through more information and more paperwork, right? Because residency officers, not only are they working clinically, but they're also teaching and they're managing a residency, and they're very, very, very busy people. Okay, so what kinds of classes count as humanities courses, and how strict are the requirements for having a certain number of humanities courses? It varies. Most medical schools obviously like to see English, right? Communicating in medicine is very important. You're going to be writing all the time, even though there's less narrative writing than there used to be, but certainly verbal communication is important. So I would say that definitely you want to be taking courses in English, or in writing. Some colleges, depending on where you went to college, Amy, a lot of colleges obviously have those requirements. If you're not at a school that has strict core requirements, we do encourage you just to, at least, take an English class. Other than English, most of the medical schools that have requirements don't have humanities requirements. Okay, that said, medical school admissions committees, really like to enroll intellectually curious students into their classes. So the more interests you have, the more interesting a person you are going to be to them. So you need to keep that in mind. But when medical school admissions committees are reviewing your application, they are paying most attention to the BCPM, so the biochem physics math rigor, in terms of your coursework, and they're paying attention to your BCPM GPA, so all courses that fall under that umbrella of biochem physics math. So that's a really good question. That said, it doesn't really matter what you major in, and we have a video about this as well. As an undergraduate, medical schools are looking for diverse classes. They don't necessarily want a class full, they don't want a class full of biology majors. They don't want a class full of, history majors as well. So, they take a broad range of students who are majoring in a broad range of disciplines, okay? And it's actually interesting because the students who tend to be the most successful, if you actually break down the data, and the AMC has done this, the students who are the most successful in the process and who have the highest metrics actually are humanities students. And there are many reasons for that. It really hasn't been studied or analyzed. I would think that perhaps it's because maybe the humanities students are a little more relaxed, or they have more time to study for their MCAT. You know, I mean, who knows? But it's actually, you know, fairly interesting when you look at the data. You know, the students who are majoring in humanities are actually getting higher metrics than those students who are majoring in something like biology. How much does senior year course load matter? Like, does it matter to admissions BSMD if you take 4 or 5 APs? So this is for BSMD students. So for the most competitive colleges and for the most competitive BSMD programs, all BSMD programs are competitive. They want to see that you have taken all 5 core classes all 4 years. So that's number one, okay? They want to see that you've taken the most rigorous curriculum available to you, okay? So if, let's say, of your 5 core classes, 4 of those are APs versus 5, I don't think that's going to be a negative, but you would want your APs certainly to be in math and science. So, you know, like, let's say if you decided you didn't want to take, you know, AP language or AP, you know, history or English, certainly, you know, if you're applying to BSMD programs, those programs are going to want to see that you're taking the most rigorous courses for all 4 years of high school in science and math, certainly. Many students we find are ahead in math. So, you know, the standard track, believe it or not, is, you know, taking pre-calculus or senior year. An advanced or accelerated track is considered taking calculus your senior year. You know, but we find that most students who are applying to elite colleges and to BSMD programs are taking at least calculus, either AB or BC calculus their senior year. Some have even moved beyond that, okay? Is it too late to submit my primary application for medical school? I'm assuming is what you mean. It is a little bit on the late side. The only way that we would sort of recommend a student apply to medical school in August is if they had truly stellar numbers. So your metrics were just, you know, as high as they could go, and you had incredible experiences, letters of recommendation, also depending on, you know, your background, your demographic, you know, obviously tougher to do this as a majority applicant, just because things are so much more competitive for majority applicants, you know, but when we're evaluating a student at this phase of the application cycle for medical school, we're really paying attention to all of those details, you know, and we would give you a very honest opinion if we feel that you have a shot applying this late in the cycle. So generally speaking, that is not something we recommend, you know, but on a case-by-case basis, it's something that we might say, you know what, look, this is the state you're from, and you know, the data is really good from that state if you want to go to your state school, and you're a stellar applicant. So, you know, give it a try, understanding you're a late applicant. So, you know, we offer very individualized guidance here. We really try not to kind of, you know, just sort of, you know, take a one size fits all approach, just because we find that never works. Things are always individualized. How would medical schools view if you decided to skip fall quarter because the courses you needed weren't offered then? So if you go to a large school, you know, where it's not so easy to take the classes you need, and, you know, your schools are not, you know, the courses you need are not being offered, this was a very practical decision. You know, certainly medical schools would not hold that against you, you know, so as long as you kind of wrote about that, although students, you know, take gaps in their education to pursue other things, you know, so as long as you did something during that semester that was as valuable as coursework, you know, it doesn't have to be coursework, but as long as you did something valuable like research or some sort of community service or some kind of work, you know, related, you know, to medicine or to, you know, to service in some capacity, you know, that would not be held against you. Can you apply to the NYU 3-year accelerated MD program while being part of an accelerated 7-year BSMD DO program? Yes, as long as the BSMD program is not binding and they allow you to apply out to other programs. I don't see that NYU would limit that. in terms of you applying. I assume, I think you're talking about the Long Island program. Anyway, but yeah, you would be able to do that as long as the BSMD program that you are a part of allowed you to do that. That would be the limiting step to that. My situation is that the courses I have yet to complete in senior year are only offered in winter and spring. If I take fall off, studied for the MCAT and did part-time ENT, would that look bad? No, that would not look bad. I get it. That makes complete sense. Again, as long as you're being productive, and that would look completely legit. So that's okay. Can I submit my application without 1 or 2 prereqs, physics specifically? I would not recommend that unless you are applying to schools that don't have set requirements for physics, and they're more competency-based admissions schools, so they don't require specific requirements, but they want to see that you've taken something else in those disciplines. Then it wouldn't necessarily be held against you, but you would have to have something that illustrated your competency in physics. Okay, how many W's is too many? That's a tough question to answer. We don't like cookie cutter. It would depend on the application. It would depend why and how the W's happened. Were they all in a single semester because, there was some type of illness or tragedy in your family? It really is very circumstantial. What are your other grades? Where are the W's in? Are they spotty? Are they always in BCPM classes? That would not look good. But like if they were all clustered in a single semester, across different disciplines, and you had A's, for the rest of your college career, and you also then have an explanation for why those W's happened, then that wouldn't necessarily be a terrible thing. So again, these things are very circumstantial. I am currently in the military. I want to go to pre-med after I finish my enlistment. Would this be a downfall since I've been out of school? Absolutely not. I mean, having military experience, gives you a world view that many pre-medical students don't have. It gives you maturity and understanding and compassion and competence and all of that. So certainly if you wanted to, I assume what you're saying is that you have to go back and take your prerequisites. No, especially if you're a combat medic, that's super impressive. We've definitely worked with some military applicants who have had similar roles in the military, and they're actually looked upon very, very favorably, and they interview very, very well. Just because students who have done that tend to be, more mature and, have great interpersonal skills. So I think that would actually be looked upon in a very, very positive way. How important is rigor as long as you meet the prerequisites? For example, would a B+ in advanced physics class look as good as an A- in a less rigorous physics class, assuming both meet the prereq? No. So, generally speaking, it's always better to take the higher rigor class as long as you're not bringing down your overall GPA. So certainly B+ on a transcript. This is not going to hurt you as long as it doesn't bring down your overall BCPM GPA to below a 3.5. So rigor is definitely looked at. I would say if you're getting a C, even a flat B in an advanced class, then maybe you consider taking the less rigorous class, but a B+ is okay. That's actually quite good, especially if it's an advanced class. Again, looking at the entire transcript and assuming that the rest of the transcript is super strong. Okay. Super strong, meaning that it's not dropping you below a 3.5. Rigor is definitely considered, but many, many med schools do have thresholds and cutoffs for certain GPAs, which is why you don't want to let that GPA drop, to below a 3.5. Okay. I'm interested in spending a gap year during a post-bac training program at the NIH. Do you have any thoughts on how med schools view these programs? So I'm interested in doing gap year, doing post-bac training program. No, I assume you're talking about the post-bac training program at the NIH. That's what you want to do during your gap year. No, that sounds fabulous. As long as you're not talking about a post-bac program where you're taking medical school prerequisites you've already taken. I don't think that's what you're referring to. I think you're referring to a program that you enroll in after you graduate from college at the NIH. That would be fabulous. That would be great. I don't know if you're, Forrest, if you need to bump your BCPM GPA. Special master's programs are typically, what students do for those purposes, but assuming that you're doing this program because of your interest, I think that sounds terrific. Does scribe work or EMT work look better on an application? They both look wonderful. These are, two of the only ways that you can really get hands-on experience as a pre-medical student, and they're both terrific. Any type of work that puts you in a clinical arena is something that is very, very valued by medical school admissions committees right now. What tier is EMS on the BSMD application? I don't really know what you mean by tier, but EMS on the BSMD application is great. And, for the same reason it's great on a med school application, right? Just because it's one of the only ways as a young person to get hands-on clinical experience. Do you have particular thoughts about a higher MCAT 513, 514 that is unbalanced and let's say a low subscore of 124 in Chem Phys? In the context of a 4.0 science GPA? Okay, it depends, Jacob, on where the 4.0 is from, what, college or university. Is it a rigorous college or university? Right off the top of my head, I think that having a lower subscore in Chem Phys, assuming that that is not supported by a low GPA in, chemistry and physics classes, I think that would be okay. Again, a 124 at some schools, especially very competitive schools, could, potentially get you screened out, but not at many and most schools. Okay, the 513, 514 is a very solid MCAT that together with a 4.0 GPA should get you screened in at all of your, your medical schools that you're applying to, except maybe for the very, top tier schools. And then when they see that 4.0 science GPA, then they look at, okay, where did this student go to college? What is the reputation of the college? What classes did they take? Then they kind of take a deeper dive into your transcript and your coursework. But I would say that would not be a deal breaker, by any stretch. What is considered a strong tie to a state? That is a great question, especially for state schools that accept the majority of their applicants from in-state. Strong tie usually means you've gone to school there, or you've worked there, or you have family in that state. You've spent a lot of time there, as a kid. So something, let's say you have a parent from there, or your grandparents live there, so something that sort of shows that you're connected to that state in a really sincere way. Okay, so research training program at the NIH for us would be wonderful. That's a great idea. If you could post the link to, or send me the link to that program, info@mededits.com. I'm just curious what that program is, but off the top of my head, that sounds like a great program, great opportunity. Will a well-written and personal recommendation from a hospital chief be good for my application? Generally speaking, unless that hospital chief has worked with you directly and has direct experience, with you, they've worked with you, that actually could hurt you more than it could help you. So generally speaking, letters from big names, unless those big names you've had direct contact with those big names, it's not really going to help you. Also, depending on what type of hospital it is, if it's an academic hospital, certainly, and if it's someone with an academic position, yes. If it's more of a community hospital, not as much. So that's the long answer to that. In addition to describing EMT, what other ways can you get clinical experience? Working in free clinics, I think, is a great way to get clinical experience. Taking vital signs, working as a medical assistant, working as an ultrasonographer, working as a phlebotomist, working as an OR tech. Anything that puts you, directly in the line of patient care, so to speak, and working directly with patients, even if you're not offering medical care, just because then that you're having patient contact, you're also observing everything that's going on around you. And so it just, gives you a lot of insight into how medicine is practiced. I have 5 hours of shadowing for multiple different specialty doctors, each from the same hospital. How can I organize that on my application? So if you're talking about the Common App, the Common App only offers you 10 spots, for your experiences, which is not a lot. And it only offers you 150 characters to describe, that experience. So I would probably group those into a single category, average out the hours. The description would be something like, shadowing multiple physicians across different specialties, and then write about what you observed, a little bit. The Common App is so stringent in terms of, the amount of space that you have to write about your experiences. I'm guessing that just getting an EMT certification isn't enough to stand out on med school applications. How many hours of work would you need to complete to make the EMT certification stand out? So yeah, this is true. Only getting certified is not going to help you. I'd say the more hours, the better, right? So, and consistency is key. So let's say you are a current student, do you have time? And is this a student run EMS group? Would you have time for 1 8-hour shift, a week? That would sort of be ideal. If you're taking a gap year, obviously, doing a few shifts a week would be ideal. I don't like to quantify things and how many hours do I need. I need to really stand out. An experience within an experience, you have to have like 500 plus hours, but that doesn't mean the experience can't be valuable if it's less than that. Okay. Do you think it's worth to take a post-bac year to go from a 3.6, 3.7 cumulative? I don't think so, unless your BCPM GPA itself is beneath a 3.5. And I would also want to see the MCAT and how the MCAT correlates with that GPA. But to bump by 0.1, I don't really think that's necessary. What you could also do, if you just sort of wanted to prove, an upward trend or something of that nature, rather than taking a full program, consider just taking 1 or 2 classes in the sciences to kind of show that, let's say, whatever upward trend you've had, you're continuing with that trend, so that's another way to think about that. Does being a varsity athlete help in the application? Absolutely. Varsity athletics as a college student is a huge, huge commitment. A lot of the qualities and characteristics that you need to be a successful varsity athlete in college, you also need to be a doctor. So for certain, that helps you. Okay, we're nearing the end here. Are letters from science letters needed? Professors, I assume you mean. I went to school with a massive pre-med class, so didn't get any from them. I did get from lab supervisors. So this is a common problem. If you go to a huge school that has huge classes, you only work with TAs. A way to resolve this problem is to have the TAs write the letter and have the professors co-sign. Happens all the time when our students go to bigger schools where they're not working, directly with professors, but you definitely need science letters. Principal investigator letters work as well, lab supervisors, but, think about trying to go the TA/professor co-sign route if that's possible. How do admissions officers view virtual shadowing? Not that favorably. I would say the only time that they viewed that as a substitute was during COVID. It's possible that, as virtual shadowing, kind of takes hold, becomes more common, that maybe they'll be a little bit more accepting of it. But, usually virtual shadowing, there are 25 students, just kind of watching one doctor. And shadowing in general has just, is not one of the, most desired activities at this point either. You want to do some shadowing across specialties, but passive activities generally are not as well regarded as active activities. So virtual shadowing would be pretty low on my list in terms of, opportunities to take advantage of. Okay, so that is all for tonight. I encourage you all to tune in next week. I will be here again. So if I didn't get to your questions, please be here next week, and I will do my best to answer them, and try to pop in right at 7. I know that a lot of people get notifications, as we go onto YouTube, but things are always a bit quieter at the beginning of the right at 7 o'clock. So if you want to try to tune in right at 7, please put that on your calendar now, so you remember, and subscribe subscribe to our YouTube channel and encourage your friends to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And also email us if you have any suggestions for how I could improve office hours, how we can improve our YouTube channel. I'm always open to suggestions, and I love hearing from all of you. So thank you so much. Have a terrific week.